At Big Legal. Hilarious.
Who care and who rise to any occasion. When I joined Utah's 2002 Olympics team, the games were in trouble. People wondered whether we would be able to recruit the 25,000 volunteers we needed to work 17 straight days for no pay and no tickets. When we put out the word, 47,000 applied. Utah has a lot to teach the politicians in Washington. Utah has balanced its budgets. Washington is buried in debt. Utah exports more abroad than it imports. Washington has that backwards. Utah welcomes legal immigrants around the world. Washington sends immigrants a message of exclusion. And on Utah's Capitol Hill, people treat one another with respect. I decided to run for United States Senate because I believe I can help bring Utah's values and Utah's lessons to Washington. Utah is a better model for Washington than Washington is for Utah. Over the last 5 years, Anna has spent a good deal of time with our 24 grandchildren. I've gone back to business, campaigned for Republicans, and met with young people across the country. Anna's championed her Center for Neurologic Research. Given all that America faces, we feel that this is the right time for me to serve our state and our country. I ask for your support and your vote. I look forward to meeting you over the coming year. If you give me this opportunity, I will owe the Senate seat to no one but the people of Utah. No donor, no corporation will own my campaign or bias my vote. And let there be no question, I will fight for Utah.
At Fake News. Apple and Kevin Durant S35 Media to develop a scripted drama unless Tony Parker, Blake Griffin, Steve Nash also have scripted projects in the works. At TT45Pack, at Daily Mail. Surveillance video shows a would-be burglar throwing a brick in an attempt to break a window, but missing and hitting his partner instead. The suspect drags his partner away afterwards, via Daily Mail. At CRTV, at Michaela Malky. What at Michaela Malkin explains that illegal alien border crossers are cut in another line to get organ donations. Watch more Michelle at.
Unfortunately, my friends, we do not have enough people in the media, politics, or medicine who have working brains and spines. Open borders plus healthcare entitlements equals a recipe for bankruptcy. The hospital at issue in this new case is Oregon Health and Science University in Portland. Last week, the institution informed illegal alien Sylvia Lezama Santos that she was ineligible for a liver transplant because she lacked, quote, lawful permanent residence or immigrant documentation. But less than a day later, after the local ACLU started howling that the policy was cruel and inhumane, OHSU reversed course. Let's stop wheedling about compassion and talk about common sense. There are an estimated 17,000 people waiting for a liver transplant in the United States. The median national waiting time in 2006 was 321 days. According to national statistics, 20 patients on average die in the U.S. each day while waiting for a potentially life-saving transplant operation. How many American patients currently on the national organ waiting list are denied access to healthy livers, kidneys, lungs, and hearts so that illegal border crossers can cut in front of the line again? When resources are scarce, as the supply of voluntarily donated organs notoriously are, why shouldn't U.S. citizens get top priority? More importantly, who is paying for all these illegal alien transplants? The average cost of a liver transplant is nearly $580,000, according to the United Network for Organ Sharing. That doesn't include the cost of follow-up and anti-rejection medication costs.
At Jiva Jerky.
According to the
you
Federation for American
maybe you got even one vote because of Russian interference, Dr. Jill Steinu. I think the question is, insert wildly off-topic filibuster here.
$12 billion. In Illinois, after Open Borders activists staged protests and hunger strikes, the state passed a law that provided $7 million in funding for illegal alien organ transplants, as well as subsidies for post transplant drugs. It covered nearly 700 illegal aliens enrolled in the state's kidney dialysis program. Each transplant there cost taxpayers $60,000 to $70,000, plus a $15,000 lump sum payment for ancillary fees and services. Any extra costs incurred, complications, organ rejections, etc., will be swallowed up by the hospitals, which most likely means the costs will be shifted to legal insured patients who will be forced to pay higher health insurance premiums. Welcome to America.
At 1:30, mark your calendars for March 24th. It is time to mark for our lives. Kids and families will take to the streets of DC to demand that we end gun violence and mass shootings in our schools today. Sign up and learn. At Karsh. Jill Stein is on MSNBC right now whining about she was alleged candidate in 2016. It is like watching the Venuns drown in the ball pit at a Chuck E. Cheese.
Faced with a hostile, nuclear-armed neighbor, South Korea's military has announced the creation of a decapitation unit. In the event of a war, the mission of the Special Task Brigade would be to take out the leadership of North Korea. But this is not South Korea's first attempt at creating a team of possible assassins. In 1968, after a bloody North Korean incursion, South Korea created a top-secret hit squad called Unit 684. The assassination squad was sent to this uninhabited island called Shilmido for years of training. The initial plan was to recruit death row inmates, but in the end, intelligence officers chose 31 civilians from the streets of South Korean cities.
They were either a shoeshine boy, a newspaper boy, a cinema worker, or a bouncer. They would approach the ones who looked like they might have played some sports and had a strong physique.
In 1970, Yang Dong-soo was a 21-year-old Air Force sergeant sent to Shilmido Island to train Unit 684. The conditions on the island were often brutal.
Iraq German Islamic State bride sentenced to 6 years in prison use DW 18.2.2018.
In fact, 5 other recruits were executed for desertion or crimes such as threatening their trainers. For more than 3 years, unit members weren't allowed to communicate
tragicomic
at all
photos
with
of
the
everyday life
outside
in former
world.
East Germany RSDW
Finally,
16.2018.
On the morning of August 23, 1971, Unit 684 staged a bloody mutiny on this beach. They began killing their trainers one by one. When Yang heard gunfire that morning, he initially thought it was a North Korean attack. But then he says one of his trainees shot him through the neck.
When I woke up, I was bleeding from the neck. Everywhere, trainers like me were being killed by the recruits or running away. It was chaos.
Yang says he dragged himself out onto these rocks,
budget chief wants billions more from Germany. Ugandan shores friends 24.
Trainers. Unit 684 wasn't finished.
Ethiopia declares state of
They
emergency
made it
after
to the
PMS
mainland
resignation
and
French
hijacked
24.
a bus to the capital, where 20 members died in clashes
Israel's
with
Netanyahu
Korean
1-0
security
anti-test
forces.
tower resolve news
4
DW
survived to be
82.2018.
later executed. For decades, the
Passenger
brutal
plane
story
crashes in
of
southern Iran with
Shilmido
66
Island
aboard
was
friends
covered
24.
up. Until the Korean blockbuster movie Shilmido hit screens in 2003.
In the Russian
Though it
investigation,
led
crews
to
were
a
lost in
public
translation
government
wired.
investigation, this former Unit 684 trainer claims much of the film is fiction. The mutineers were victims who were sacrificed, he tells me, and so were the trainers. To this day, the survivor often preaches about how God saved him on that terrible day when the assassins turned on their commanders. Ivan Watson, CNN, Shilmido, South Korea.
The governor of Latvia's central bank has been detained by the country's anti-corruption agency, prompting calls for him to temporarily step down. Latvia's finance minister has urged Ilmars Rimcevic to relinquish his post while an investigation takes place. No explanation has been given for his detention. Rimcevic is also a member of the European Central Bank's Governing Council. There are fears his arrest could harm Latvia's economy, which recovered last year after losing more than a fifth of its output during the global financial crisis.
Greetings, citizens of the world. Air Force officer who witnessed attack on SEALs WHO killed bin Laden
Swan
just
song of the
said we
Center of
have all been
Anchors,
lied
Part
to.
5 of Flatline does
Obama
not
has
spell
hell to
recovery
pay.
zero edge.
A highly decorated Air Force officer is breaking her silence about a disturbing incident back in 2011. It has been marked as one of the deadliest Navy SEAL attacks in the history of the United States. She claims that the Obama administration covered up what happened to 38 of the soldiers in Afghanistan. Captain Joni Marquez and her crew were working the dark morning hours on their AC-130 gunship when they were summoned to conduct a mission as almost like a 911 type of a situation. The gunship was ordered to fly close in air support above Afghanistan's dangerous Tangi Valley, in Wardak Province, assisting troops with their Army's 75th Ranger Regiment who were being fired on by 8 heavily armed Taliban insurgents. According to our source, Right Things US, Marquez recounts what she witnessed that night as she was the fire control officer aboard the ship. Her job that night was to ensure the sensors on the weapons were aligned, so that her crew could hone in on the terrorists' target. I had the sensor operators immediately shift to the 8 insurgents the helicopters had taken out, Marquez told Circa. 2 were still alive. We had seen 2 of them insurgents moving, crawling away from the area, as to not really make a whole lot of scene. You have 2 enemy forces
News and current
that are
affairs
still
from Germany
alive,
and around the
she
world.
said.
DW.
Permission to engage. U.S. Central Command's investigation concluded that a rocket-launched grenade from a Taliban fighter hit the Chinook and sent the helicopter into a downward spin.
Weather forecast
The
world
crash
and
killed
local
all
weather report
38
online Sky
soldiers,
News.
30 Americans, 8 Afghans. If we would have been allowed to engage that night, we would have taken out those 2 men immediately, Marquez said. She believes with her whole heart that had her team been given permission to take out the terrorists, 38 warriors would still be alive today. They continued to essentially gain more and more force behind them because they just kept knocking on doors, she said. And the 2 personnel that initially fled ended up becoming a group of 12 people. Share this story. A highly decorated Air Force officer is breaking her silence about a disturbing incident
Hungary
back
PM
in
Christian Culture Treasurer
2011.
Lex Jones info hours
It
there
has
is a warrant
been
for your
marked as
mind.
one of the deadliest Navy SEAL attacks in the history of the United States. She claims that the Obama
Avalanche on Kobe
administration
famous
covered
turning
up what
Swiss
happened
Alps near
to
French border
38
news
of the soldiers in Afghanistan.
DW82.2018.
Captain Joni Marquez and her crew were working the dark morning hours on their AC-130 gunship when they were summoned to conduct a mission as almost like a 911 type of a situation. The gunship was ordered to fly close in air support
World
above
news breaking
Afghanistan's
international news in
dangerous
headlines,
Tangi
Sky
Valley,
News.
in Wardak province, assisting troops with their army's 75th
The
Ranger
fate of minorities in
Regiment who were being
post-ISIS
fired
Syria
on
and
by
Iraq.
8
Syria
heavily
deeply.
armed Taliban insurgents. According to our source, Right Things U.S.,
Political news
Marquez
international and
recounts
the
what she
politics, Sky
witnessed
News.
at night as she was the fire control officer aboard the ship. Her job at night was to ensure the sensors on the weapons were aligned, so that her crew could hone in on the terrorists' target. I had the sensor operators immediately shift to the 8 insurgents the helicopters had taken out, Marquez told Circa. 2 were still alive. We had seen 2 of them insurgents moving, crawling away from the area, as to not really make a whole lot of scene. You have 2 enemy forces that are still alive, she said. Permission to engage. U.S. Central Command's investigation concluded that a rocket-launched grenade from a Taliban fighter hit the Chinook and sent the helicopter into a downward spin. The crash killed all 38 soldiers, 30 Americans, 8 Afghans. If we would have been allowed to engage that night,
Nigerian
we would
cinema
have taken
fans
out
celebrate
those 2
Black
men
Panther
immediately,
release.
Marquez said. She believes with her whole heart that had her team been given
Russian
permission to
mercenaries,
take out
a
the
discreet weapon in
terrorists,
Syria.
38 warriors would still be alive today. They continued to essentially gain more and more force behind them because they just kept knocking on doors, she said. And the 2 personnel that initially fled ended up becoming a group of 12
American
people.
figure skater Vincent Zhu
We
is
had
brilliant.
to sit and
Amusing.
watch that, and I think that was one of the hardest things that I had to do, she said. That man was, dying on the ground. Marquez says the pain of living with what happened has taken its toll, and she was diagnosed with post-traumatic stress disorder and is in therapy. If we would have been allowed to engage that night,
Copycat
we
how
would have
Facebook
taken
tried to
out
squash
those 2
Snapchat
men
wire.
immediately. I mean, it's just one of those things where you know that it could have all been prevented, she said. Ridiculous rules of engagement that basically state that you can't shoot until being shot upon. A weapon has to be pointed, and essentially fired at you, in order for you to shoot, and you have the proper clearance so that you don't.
Processing search parameters. Whoa. Wacky stuff going on all over the place. Syria experts at the World Economic Forum's annual meeting in Davos weighing on what must be done to improve the humanitarian situation and alleviate the impact of war in Syria. Copycat. How Facebook has tried to squash Snapchat bar wired. The internet is really big, really big, guys. Just before Facebook went public in 2012, Mark Zuckerberg had a bound red book titled Facebook was not originally created to be a company placed on every employee's desk. The book, written by Zuckerberg himself, ended with an urgent, even ominous rallying cry. If we don't create the thing that kills Facebook, someone else will. Embracing change isn't enough. It has to be so hardwired into who we are that even talking about it seems redundant. The internet is not a friendly place. Things that don't stay relevant don't even get the luxury of leaving ruins. They disappear. Consciously or not, Zuckerberg was channeling another book that is practically holy scripture in the cult-like startup world. The Innovator's Dilemma, a 1997 volume by Harvard Business School professor Clayton Christensen. He wrote it before disruptive innovation was a punchline on the Bo comedy Silicon Valley, and it has managed to maintain its revered status for 2 decades. Excerpted from How to Turn Down $1 Billion. The Snapchat Story by Billy Gallagher. Copyright 2018 by William Gallagher and reprinted by permission of St. Martin's Press. Which brings us to Snapchat, a company that perfectly embodies the business dynamics Christensen laid out in The Innovator's Dilemma. A new player in a market makes a product or service that is so far beneath what the big players are offering that it at first seems silly. Why would they waste their time down there? Who cares about a sexting app? But the entrant fills a need, as teenagers prefer using an app where the messages disappear after a time. Then the entrant gets better, adding more features like video sharing and geo-filters, and moves up market, adding Snapchat stories and moving into the social networking, attracting a bigger share of the market, passing Twitter in daily active users, and better customers, older, more affluent users, and celebrities and media companies signing on as publishers. Shooting suspect was on school rifle team that Gardner Grant. G. Willikers.
Play MGM Poker, real Vegas gambling, online in Jersey. Download today and get 25 bonus dollars. In the next 10 seconds, a lot could happen. You could open
the troubled teen authorities say killed 17 people at a Florida high school excelled in an air rifle marksmanship program supported by a grant from the National Rifle Association Foundation, part of a multi-million-dollar effort by the gun group to support youth shooting clubs and other programs. Nicholas Cruz, 19, was wearing a maroon shirt with a logo from the Army Junior Reserve Officer Training Corps program at Marjorie Stoneman Douglas High School when he was arrested Wednesday shortly after the shooting. Former JOC cadets told the Associated Press that Cruz was a member of a small varsity marksmanship team that trained together after class and traveled to other area schools to compete. It was a close-knit group. One of the other cadets started calling Cruz Wolf, and the nickname stuck. He was a very good shot, said Aaron Diener, 20, who gave Cruz a right to shoot in competitions when they were part of the same 4-member team in 2016. He had an R-15 he talked about, and pistols he had shot. He would tell us, "Oh, it was so fun to shoot this rifle," or "It was so fun to shoot that." It seemed almost therapeutic to him, the way he spoke about it. The JOC marksmanship program used their rifles special made for target shooting, typically on indoor ranges at targets the size of a coin. Want to stop climate change? Educate girls and give them birth control bar wired. I found this scraping the internet. I feel so dirty now. Climate change is a ubiquitous hydra, a many-headed beast that affects everyone and everything in some form. Solutions to climate change range from the effective and the practical to the potentially catastrophically dangerous, but in this somewhat heated debate, a potent weapon in our arsenal is falling by the wayside. The empowerment of women. Robin George Andrews at Squiggly Volcano and Robin Virgie Andrews is a volcanologist and science writer whose work appears in Eiffel Science, Forbes, and elsewhere. Last year, a coalition of scientists, economists, policymakers, researchers, and business people published Project Drawdown, a compendium of ways to prevent carbon dioxide from escaping skywards. Drawing from a plethora of peer-reviewed research, the document ranks 80 practical, mitigating measures along with 20 near-future concepts that could push back the oncoming storm. Ranked in order of carbon emissions locked down by 2050, the usual suspects made the list. A moderate expansion of solar farms number 8, onshore wind turbines number 2, and nuclear power number 20, would all save tens of billions of tons of equivalent carbon dioxide emissions. Increasing the number of people on plant-rich diets number 4, and using electric vehicles number 26, are effective carbon-cutting measures often proposed by climate talks, and rightly so. The top spot went to managing refrigerants like HFCs, which are incredibly effective at trapping heat within our atmosphere. But two lesser-known solutions also made this most practical of lists. The education of girls number 6, and family planning number 7. This is a stunning revelation, one that couldn't be more pertinent, and yet, for the most part, discussions of mitigation and decarbonization focus heavily on other matters, from the perceived perils and bona fide benefits of nuclear power, to just how quickly solar power is proliferating.